there, youth and youth families, and welcome back to this time of Table Talk, where we are talking a little bit about solitude as a tool, as a spiritual discipline to assess our relationships with ourselves, with others, and with God. Today we're going to talk about our relationship with others. We're going to talk about how when we get alone, we can better assess these relationships. And yesterday we talked about 4 pictures, strength, mind, heart, and soul. And we talked about how we could use those to give attention to the relationship that we have with ourselves. And we can actually use these same sort of perspectives when it comes to having a relationship with others. I find that relationships typically evolve much like, our relationship with ourselves evolves. Like when we were babies, we started off by, like I said the other day, we knew when we were hungry and we could communicate those things, when we're hungry, dirty, that sort of thing. Then, you get a little bit older and you start to learn how to connect with your mind. And then you start asking all kinds of questions like why? You ever lived with a toddler? And that's the most famous question, is why? And so our parents, what they do is that the first opportunity, they put us into school to answer all those questions of why. Next, I think it's when we arrive kind of in middle school, I think is kind of when we have this great awakening of the heart, the emotional elements. Hey, have you ever seen the movie Inside Out from Disney? That movie? It's really quite an accurate portrayal of the things that happen inside of us as we kind of continue to mature, evolve in our relationship with ourselves and with others. And we start to, actually your brain grows. I think it's like 30% or something in that stage of life. You have this growth spurt, and most of those neurons that are building in your brain are all associated with emotional development. A lot of them are. And so that's when we kind of go from the black and white thinking about feelings when we were wee little into this full color array of different feelings in middle school, around that time, kind of the puberty sort of time. And then finally, I believe when it's kind of in that time as we're awakening with the emotion that people often start to come alive spiritually as well. Sometimes people wonder why a guy in his 40s would still be a youth pastor. Sometimes people will ask me, don't you want to be a real pastor someday? And I laugh because, you know what? The most exciting time of life, I think, is right where you guys are at in kind of junior, senior high, when all of this kind of converges and people start to come awake to the spiritual elements. I love to see that sort of thing happen. So that's why I do what I do. So let's talk a little bit about how relationships with others can evolve here and how we can give some assessment to our relationships with others and what are some of the things we can do to find greater health. And in our solitude times, we're taking a step back from these relationships to give a little bit of thought to these things so that when we return to them, we can do them well. Let's talk first of all about the first building block is the physical elements, okay? And now I'm just gonna have you think about what are the things that you pour into relationships on a physical element, because I think the first and basic building block is these things. I find that in our friendships with each other, we often start off by playing together. Think of your best friends. It's probably someone you have a common interest with, like a hobby or a sport. And one of the first ways that we show other people that we're interested in them is that we play together. And this can be one of the hard parts, I feel, in middle school and high school and even after graduation, because some of the activities that you're involved in can change very rapidly. And it can be really hard when we're not prepared for this in our relationships. We can find ourselves drifting in and out of relationships. And because we really struggle sometimes on how to manage the emotion of that, because it can feel a little bit like a rejection, when in the reality is my interest might be just a little different today than it was yesterday, and some of the people that I might hang out with, that I might play with more, because there's a new activity or whatever that I'm more interested or better suited to. Those sorts of things can affect the way that we relate with others. So I want you just to think about that and think about your relationships, because these are all very normal things in life. Think about your relationships with others. What do you do together to make your friendships stronger? What are some of your common interests? And are you at a place where you're discovering that some of your interests are changing? How does that influence or impact your relationships with others? As you spend some time in solitude, you might think about some of these things, and you might think about or discover ways that you could strengthen relationships, and you might figure out why some of the relationships that you have right now might not really feel like they're working, and what you might be able to do about that. If there are parents out there listening, if your relationships are feeling kind of dry, maybe with your spouse or with your kids, you might want to think about some of these things. How do you play together? You might need a little bit more fun in your life. You might think that, I think of it as a dad, that the most important things that I can impart to my kids are values like responsibility and hard work, and those are good. But if we want our kids to have good relationships, we might also need to model for them how we can have fun together. Anyway, let's keep on moving. First stage of relationships is the physical and how we might play together. Next, we want to talk about how we might connect with our relationships in terms of our minds. One of the things I observe in relationships is they often start off with small talk. We share the very basic thoughts. We think what our thoughts are about the weather, what our thoughts are about sports, and that sort of things. And it's when we go deeper and we start sharing opinions and our thoughts about the things that we really feel are important, we start to talk about our dreams and our philosophies and stuff. That's where we start to grow even deeper in our relationships. I find that most people's relationships kind of stall out here. It's sometimes hard to find people that we can trust with our deepest thoughts. So we just simply stop at the small talk of things. When we don't want to disagree with someone else, we just kind of keep it superficial. If we don't want to take a risk with some of our thoughts, we just keep it kind of superficial. Do you have a lot of superficial relationships in your life? People that you just kind of talk about the very basic stuff? You might want to just explore some of this. Let me ask you this. Are you a safe person to share thoughts with? Do you make other people feel good about their thoughts? Or do you prefer to look smarter than everyone else? That can be tough. When people talk to you, would they say that you really valued their thoughts, or did you make them feel kind of dumb? Often, people who don't have a great relationship with themselves will damage their relationships with others because they'll use these relationships to feel better about themselves by making the other person feel worse about themselves. Often this can seem like harmless joking, but you might need to be really honest with yourself and spend some time in solitude asking, are you a safe person? And how can you be a more safe person to others when it comes to handling their thoughts? Really brave people who have learned to trust people with their thoughts often move closer in those relationships, and they start to share the things of the heart, feelings, emotions. When we feel that we're okay to share our perspectives with another person, sometimes we'll take that step, that leap of faith, and share our feelings. The things that make us afraid, the things that make us happy, the things that make us full of joy, maybe the things that make us angry, and the list goes on and on. We tend to share our truest feelings with only our closest friends. Sometimes when people disapprove of our feelings or break our trust in those areas, it can leave pretty deep wounds. Maybe you can already start to think of some of the times when that might have happened to you. There's often nothing that can be said that can really make these things feel better. They're things that only come back as trust is rebuilt. When relationships evolve to a place where we can share our hearts, we get so close to people that we often share something that's pretty sacred. It's a place where you can't always put words to the things, you just simply feel them. Good friends can feel together. I want to ask you this, are you a safe person to feel together with? Are you good at letting people feel what they feel? Or are you one of those kinds of people that would rather offer quick bits of advice to change how people feel? Maybe these are some of the areas that you can assess in yourself as you just kind of take some time in solitude. Ask yourself those questions. And then finally, in relationships, as we're evolving here, the people that we can really successfully feel together will often open up this part of ourselves, the soul or the spiritual elements. And these are our most intimate relationships. And those are the people that we can really experience God together with. It's hard to really experience God with someone that you haven't built those other building blocks in. I have some really close friends. And you know what makes us the closest? It's the way that we connect with God together, the way that we pray together. Those are probably the most vivid times that I can think of where I felt the closest to another person. I have some friends that it doesn't matter what will come out when we talk to God. You know, we can cry, we can yell, we can laugh, you know, we can just really express the depth of the things that are going on. And I feel safe with these people that I can let whatever is inside out. Sometimes it's pretty incredible when you can just be fully present with God together with another person in a room. You know, you might think of this as times when we corporately worship together and you just really allow yourself to experience God together with other people. That's when your relationships with others can really start to go deep. Do you have anyone like this in your life? You know, where you can just experience God together with them? What might you need to do to cultivate this relationship to go deeper? You know, I want to just share with you that these sorts of things don't just happen overnight. These are things that come after years of practice. And so be patient with these things. All right, so you've got a bunch of stuff to think about again. How to assess your relationships with others. Now, as you take some time of solitude and you disengage, think about some of those questions and take a little bit of alone time to assess your relationship with others. And tomorrow we'll talk a little bit about how we can think about our relationship with God. So as you're processing this, don't hesitate to reach out to someone and ask the questions that you have. We'd love to walk together with you on this, and blessings on your day.